It is one of the iconic Canadian Olympic moments. Barcelona, 1992. The first to touch the wall in the 100-meter backstroke was Mark Tewksbury of Calgary. The celebration was on then, and Mark has been involved and around Team Canada and the Olympic program ever since. He joins us now here on Sportsnet. Mark, it has been a crazy 48 hours in the Olympic world. I wanted to talk to you today to get some context for a lot of our viewers. I mean, when you think about the three Olympics that have been canceled over the years, 1916, 1940, 1944, that's World War I and World War II. It took that for the Olympics to be canceled. This really kind of, to me, that captures exactly the magnitude of what's happening in our time, in our day right now, with Tokyo 2020 being postponed.
Absolutely. I mean, Arash, a couple of weeks ago, it was just 2 weeks ago, we were out with friends. Wednesday night, it was somebody's birthday. And somebody said, what do you think about the Olympics? And I said, well, if the Olympics are postponed, it will be the least of our worries because it will say something about where we're at. And sadly, it's nailed it. I mean, I think it's a huge statement in this global pandemic and what we have to do as a society.
So, Mark, I mean, look, you've been to Olympics where things are normal. And we've been to Olympics where there have been so many different storylines and so many different issues on the periphery of it. How do you foresee, and I know this is a very difficult question, but how do you foresee the COC and IOC going from here? What are the next steps in your mind that need to happen for the games to go on properly next year?
Well, I think everybody's on a little bit of a well, first of all, communicating and organizing with the various sports. So certainly in Canada, the Canadian Olympic Committee is talking to all the national sport federations. The IOC would be doing the same thing with the international federations. But I mean, it's virtually, for me at this moment, this is just my point of view, it's very hard to plan a lot in the upcoming days because we just don't know. When will athletes be able to go back to training facilities? When will society kind of carry on business as usual? I think we're very hopeful that a year postponement will enable the games to keep going. But to be honest, even right now, we don't know if that's actually going to be the case. So a lot of sort of worst case scenarios, imagining next steps, and a lot of uncertainty, unfortunately.
Yeah, Mark, when people ask me over the last number of weeks and months, they say, well, what about the Olympics? What do you think? I never saw this coming. I never thought we'd see the day just because of the dollar figure involved. There's talk that the organizing committee for Tokyo 2020, they've doubled their budget, spending already about $20 billion. When you talk about multiple $1 billion in the IOC, even a week ago Wednesday, we probably, 2 weeks ago, we probably didn't think things would skyrocket the way they have in the last 2 weeks period. Can you try and provide some context into just how huge it is for an Olympics to be postponed?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's mind-boggling because really, essentially, the Olympics are magical because you're bringing together the best in so many different summer sports together in one place at one time. So if you didn't bring those people together, they would all usually they would have world championships in their own sports, and there'd probably be 20 to 26 of those happening instead of the Olympics. So the Olympics postponing a year actually now runs directly into all of those world championship schedules. So all those cities have been booked, and it's just sort of a domino ripple effect. It's just one example on the sports side. On the sponsorship marketing side, the Olympic movement basically funds the international sport federations, the International Olympic Committee, the marketing revenues that happen from the games. Mostly, I mean, there's some money that's not accounted for. It's within the IOC's parameters to spend how they want, but about 90% plus gets redistributed to all the different sport federations. And without that money, international sport would have a very difficult time surviving. International federations like badminton or bobsleigh, or some of the sports that don't have the television rights that a figure skating or an athletics might get, really survive on that flow through of money. So all sorts of ways, it just throws a lot of different curveballs to the system that we'll have to probably reconfigure how things are done going forward.
Yeah, and broadcast-wise, I mean, that's where the IOC gets the bulk of its revenue. Almost $6 billion for Tokyo 2020 was coming from TV and streaming rights. NBC alone, Mark, they had sold over $1.2 billion worth of ads. I was told that in the lead up, they were close to going to production. Companies like Procter and Gamble and Visa and Toyota for their broadcast commercial spots. Some had already been filmed. That's now all out the door. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars of investments in addition to the athletes. And that's where I wanted to get to with you, because, I mean, athletes live in 4-year cycles, right? The quadrennial is what it's all about. And now suddenly that has been flipped upside down. The only message as of today from the IOC is no later than the summer of 2021. Mark the athlete, Mark the Olympian prepares for the unknown now. How, when his entire career, he has been focused and trained to do it one way. How do you think that now unfolds?
Well, first of all, I think the modern athlete is much more adaptable than maybe the athlete I was 30 years ago. But I think that, the big thing for me today is the word postponement versus cancellation. I think postponement leaves some hope, some possibility, some recovery to some of these situations you've talked about, not just from the athlete point of view, but from the television broadcast rights, et cetera. Athletes, I think that athletes are first and foremost also human beings. So athletes that are supposed to be thinking about the Olympics are actually locked up in lockdown in different parts of the world, can't get to facilities, worried about grandparents, family members, maybe overseas, etc. So I think that there's a big relief. I think that today athletes know for sure not training will not jeopardize their performance this summer. And I think that 36 hours ago, even though we're in this horrible situation, as an athlete, layered on top of that is this, I've waited my whole life for this moment. Will I be able to do it? So right. I'm really grateful, at least for the decisiveness that, okay, for sure, this summer is off.
Yeah, we spoke with Rosie McLennan yesterday, the 2-time reigning Olympic gold medalist in trampolining. She said, yeah, we're creatures of habit. We're all about routine. But she said at this point, it's about adaptability and resilience. And I thought that was a really interesting way to approach this. I asked Marnie McBean this yesterday, Mark. You guys were fellow teammates at Barcelona 92. Marnie, of course, won a couple of golds at those Olympics. And it was interesting getting her answer. I'd love to go back in time. And if I said to Mark Tewksbury in March of 1992, hey, man, no Barcelona this summer, how would you have handled that?
Context is everything. So within the context of what's happening now, I would say, good, thanks.
Really, yeah, even at that age?
I mean, listen, there's some disappointment, of course, but I think that all of us recognize that as big and important as the Olympics are and as great as sport is, this is just one little piece of humanity and this pandemic that's taking over the planet. So no, but I hear you. I mean, it would be devastating if there was not this context, just to hear that. But again, if you told me, but it's postponed until whatever, then I would be able to recalibrate in my brain. I'd be able to say, okay, means I ease off the preparation where I am now and I start to have a different focus. So I'm grateful that at least it's postponed for now.
As a Canadian, as someone who travels a lot proudly with my Canadian passport, I was thrilled to see the Canadian Olympic Committee and Team Canada take the lead on Sunday night, announcing that summer of 2020, we're not going to the Olympics nor the Paralympics. What was your reaction to that announcement initially, Mark?
Well, listen, I think it says a lot to the leadership of Canadian sport at the moment. I have to give a shout out to Tricia Smith, the president of the Olympic Committee, to the Paralympic Committee that really came together so quickly with such solidarity and such clarity for our athletes. I think the approach was really smart. I think that we could control what we can control. And so I think that looking at what's happening in our country and the lack of access for any public pools or stadiums or arenas or anything, any chance of our teams, and we've got the most teams we've ever had qualified for an Olympics, of course, for Tokyo.
Sure.
They can't come together and train. And I think it just became kind of, if we're talking about athletes' safety, and athletes can't train now, so what does that mean 4 months from now? And I think it was just a smart decision. I was actually a little bit surprised by how bold Canada was as a country and the Olympic Committee was, and in a very good way. I'm very proud.
So surprised, how so?
It's not easy to be first to take a stand like that, but I
Right.
think that based on really good information and actually linking it back to process, because at the end of the day, the International Olympic Committee is saying athletes' health is first and foremost, as is the safety of people involved in the Olympics. And based on that, we can sort of work backwards and say, well, if that's where we're coming from, then it doesn't make sense to host games in July.
You made the point that it's a relief for the athletes who can't train right now and prepare themselves for the Olympics. I think today, the announcement Tuesday morning coming out of Tokyo, coming from the IOC, that yes, indeed, the Olympics are postponed, is an even further relief. That it's not just, okay, I don't have to worry about not training, but it's also that, I don't know if comfort is the right word to use, but the reassurance that I'm not going to miss these games. What I've worked 4 years to prepare for, I'm not going to be a spectator for.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a species, we don't do well with uncertainty. We
Yeah.
like to know what's going to happen. And so I think these decisions being made, and I'm grateful too that it was fairly rapid. On Sunday it was announced the IOC was going to take 4 weeks to assess the situation, which I think was a catalyst for lots of things that you saw happen on Sunday, which then became a catalyst for this decision being made very quickly by Japan and by the International Olympic Committee. There's going to be days of real sense of depression and sadness and loss. I know I felt like that yesterday. I just kind of felt sad. And this was just based on Canada not going, not yet the Olympics being postponed. It's just, it's sad because it says, I'm sad for the event, but I'm sad for what that says about the state of the world. As you noted, 3 Olympics in history due to a world war. This is a world war against a pandemic. So it's a difficult space to be in for all of us.
Yeah, 4 weeks turned into 40 hours for the IOC and the organizers of Tokyo 2020 to ultimately come to that decision. Mark, there's a lot
to ironic because they were so slow, right? They were so slow, but then they kind of caught up to the time frame of this epidemic. Like this is how quickly things change, and finally that whole decision-making body got caught up in the speed of this.
Mark, I just wonder, and this is based on no sourced information, but I've thought about this, of one of your swimming predecessors and how influential he's been globally on bringing this up. Dick Pound was the first to raise warning signs about 3-4 weeks ago that, hey, the Olympics could be in jeopardy, that this is a really big thing that has to be addressed. We know how the IOC is. I mean, there's the caramel secret, and then there's the IOC. They're right about the same when it comes to the vault of keeping things ironclad. And it was Dick Pound who said, hold on a minute here. And then it was Dick Pound yesterday who said, these things are going to get postponed. I just wonder if one of our own, if Dick Pound hadn't come out, in recent days and said, let's pump the brakes a little bit on this thing, where we might be today with this.
Dick has always been one who speaks his mind, and certainly that's quite refreshing amongst the International Olympic Committee.
In this day and age, yes.
For those on the outside, for those on the inside, I don't know. I'm not sure they would say that Dick had that much influence on their decision, although for sure he's a voice out there, but he's one of, I think there's a lot of series of events, Canada taking that stand on the weekend being one of them. Australia, I think other national Olympic committees have reached out to the IOC more privately, indicating their position. So I think there was just real mounting pressure, but you have to give kudos to Dick. He's always out there speaking his mind, and he usually is on the forefront.
Mark, finally, there's a lot to unpack here, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to the athletes. It comes down to the competitors. It comes down to the Olympians themselves. And Team Canada was scheduled to have a huge contingent again going to Tokyo. Some who may have been in the mix for this summer may not be there next year. Some who were the odd man or woman out may find themselves walking with the team into the opening ceremony. If any of them reach out to you to pick your brain or ask for some advice, and I know it's a very broad statement because every sport is different, individual, team, and people at different stages of their careers. What would be your message though to a vet who's trying to weigh the decision of, am I going to put the body through this again just to lay it all on the line, just to try and qualify to get there? What would your message be to somebody who's on the fence of whether or not I should hang them up or keep going?
Well, I would ask them some questions to make sure that they could live with whatever their outcome was. But I would certainly share a story of, the lead up to my last Olympics, where about a year before there's a big technical change. I saw that I had to do things differently. And I just knew that I had to do it, or I could never live with myself for the rest of my life without making that decision. And I think this is, again, one of those really huge forks in the road where people know, and if you've got it in you or not. I think that for 90, maybe 9% of the athletes, if they're here now today in March of 2020, they're going to make the decision to keep going for whatever that date is in the next year to 18 months. I would put my money on it, but athletes know. And I would just ask them a few questions to make sure they could live with whatever their decision was.
Mark, listen, there's so many layers to this. We appreciate you making time. We appreciate your insights. And hopefully this means next summer we'll all be in Tokyo.
Exactly. That's the least of the world's things. But I was actually just so excited to go see these games in this amazing city. So hopefully they still happen. And thanks for the time, Rash.
Okay, Mark. Thanks.